Hello ART104, this is the second bite-size for Maya video that I wanted to record for you, based in response to some of the questions and queries that I've received via email. In this edition, we're just going to take a look at the editing tools for curves. So I know that we've talked about creating curves and attaching cameras to curves, and we know that we can use sort of control vertex or edit points to manipulate existing curves. So we'll just take a look at that in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to move over to my stage now, and the first things that we probably want to do is obviously to create a curve. So I'm just going to go to create, and of course head down to curve tools, and then we'll create an EP curve tool. So give that a click, and I'll just keep this relatively simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then of course have to use my W or translate key to bring that up above my stage, because by default it will make it underneath that. Okay, so now we know so far if we go to control vertex, we can manipulate the curves based on the control vertexes, which are these little vertice type style icons that are points that exist outside of the curve that make it work, and we can see how that works. Okay, we can also instead of using that, we can use edit point. Edit point is obviously a bit more in line with how we might think in real term space, in that we see the point is actually on the curve itself, the little line. So I'm just going to edit this curve slightly and move those about. Don't worry about getting this accurate. This is all about just having a look at how curve tools can be used. So let's take a look at the curve tools that are available to us. So that's a curve, and we might attach a camera to that or an object, whatever it is we want to animate. We can use that curve and we can turn it into a motion path by, of course, using the animation tool, which is constrain and then attach to motion path. But I'm not going to click that for now, because we're not trying to turn this into a motion path. We're simply going to have a look at the tools available to edit curves. So I'm going to move back to my modeling menu, and then of course somewhere along the top here you actually see beside mesh display is this curves window, which underneath it has a bunch of different tools we can use to manipulate and edit our curves. So I'm actually going to unlock that and go through each of these tools just to show you what they do and how you can use those to better create curves that suit your needs. So we'll click that, we'll bring it over here, we'll have a look at it. So we're going to just keep this curve selected, and then I'm just going to undo the results every time. So in this case, I have a simple, I'm just going to highlight these edit points, a little point. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points on this curve that represent, of course, the 5 clicks that I originally made. I'm just going to go back to object mode and select that. Whoops. And of course, if I click the bend tool, you'll notice that that's what happens. It bends it around the average curve. Now, that might be useful to some people, it might not be. So if we go into edit point tool, we can actually select certain points and see how that affects it. And you'll see that nothing happens, because this tool only works on the whole. If we click bend, and that's okay, we can see that it does that. Okay, so some instances that might be useful, some instances maybe not. Of course, you can also check the options about how much you want that to bend or twist. So that is 0.2. If I was to set that to 0.1 and then apply it, we can see that the bend happens in a slightly more extreme way. If I go to 0.9, we can apply it, we can see equally an extreme way. Not the handiest of tools, let's put it that way. But depending what you're trying to do, that might be a useful tool for you. Of course, we have the curl tool, which you can see here. It attempts to curl it, but of course, this is something with some dynamism in it already. So we can change that curl amount and see how well it affects things. Okay, not entirely close. So again, depending on the complexity of your curve, these tools will have different effects. You can also check the scale curvature, very limited results. And of course, we can use the straighten tool, which has a much more instant result. We can see that has simply straightened that curve as well. The one that I skipped there was the smooth tool, and the smooth tool is probably one that you're going to use a lot. So bend, curl, and scale, depending on the complexity of what you're doing, tend not to be that useful. However, the smooth and straighten tool are very useful. So I'm just going to use the smooth tool quickly, and we can see that it smoothed out that curve. It almost smoothed it too much though. So let's try putting in a different result. That's a smooth factor of 1. Can we go lower? 0.5? No. So that's an important thing to consider. That smooth curvature thing has limits. If I apply that, it's practically a straight line now. So again, we can see that the results of that are indeed quite extreme, even on the lowest possible setting. Okay, I'm going to go back a few steps, close that. Now, we're going to go down to the Align, the Add Points tool, Attach tool, Detach tool, and then of course we can probably just maybe finish on the Rebuild and Reverse Direction tool, which are very important tools as well. So the Align tool is important for all sorts of reasons, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm just going to move this curve somewhere here. I'm going to make a new curve now. Create, Curve Tools, EP Curve Tool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, W, and we'll bring that back up. Whoops, so I've lost my curve already. Now what's interesting about this is I can just do a couple of quick edits to make it a more filled out looking curve. So we can see that maybe that's a bit flat, so let's bring that up a little bit, just so we've got something more varied to play with. Now what's really useful about the Align tool, if I click this as an object, and then re-click here, and then click Align, look how it attaches itself to the end of the previous curve and lets me actually continue it, which is really super useful. So we can actually do sort of animated curves, and of course we can now think about continuing that curve further, and in some instances that's exactly what some people are looking to do. However, in this case it's aligned, but it is still, oops, excuse me, we can see they're actually technically attached, which is great, but they are separate objects. Now, excuse me, while I have to select the original, because essentially it's a parenting now. I'll move that across. I want to check if I can attach an object to that. Now, let's go here, and select that, and we're going to try constraining that. So I go to animation mode, and then constrain, motion paths, attach to motion path. This time I'm just going to make sure that these settings are reset, because that will be changed from the last time. And of course we can see that's now been attached. Now, here's the important information that I was trying to highlight. It still sees the end of this first curve as the end. So this curve, while we have attached it, they are only essentially groups to each other, even though our outliner doesn't say anything about that. So what we want to do is go back there and reconsider the choices that we made. So it's useful for aligning it to the end of something, and you may want a secondary camera that comes in at this point and takes over from this object, but it's just one way of thinking. Okay, so we're going to delete that curve, we no longer need it. And we can see here that this sphere is now attached there. So let's think about drawing a new curve instead. Create, Curve Tools, EP Curve Tool, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. W, bring that up, and of course go to my edit points, and of course just make some necessary edits as you see fit. Now of course previously we aligned these, so let's see what happens now if we try attaching. So I'm just going to go to object mode, I'm going to select this, I'm going to attach, and look at that. This is where things have changed. Now we can see that there is a new curve that has been formed, and it now is completely unique. It is a duplicate of both of those things attached to each other, and it does, as you can see, connects them there. It does, however, mean that we would need to reconnect this sphere to this new curve, and one way of doing that is actually getting rid of the old curves, if you wish, and now dealing with this new curve. So now if I was to attach these together, click, click, and then of course go to constrain, motion paths, attach to motion path, we can see here that it has now attached. One big problem, it's back to front. Now if you ever find yourself dealing with a back to front curve, a really simple solution for that is our reverse direction. So I'm going to select this object, and we're going to click reverse direction, and there we go. It flips the front of this back to 1. And sometimes that's just a handy tool for all sorts of reasons. But in any case though, those are the major tools when it comes to editing your curves. The ability to edit them is super, super valuable and important. And of course we can also continue curves as well. So You see, if I was to select this curve and go to Add Points tool, it'll now let me resume adding points from the end of the original design. As you can see here, look at this as well. As I click, the frame number actually follows it. So I'm just going to finish that. I'm just going to move this up further so we can see the full curve. I've just added a bunch of extra curves there, and in real time this is updated to reflect those changes, and that is a super useful tool for editing all sorts of motion paths or objects or cameras that you might discover along the way. Now, of course, my curves now got a little bit crazy. Now this is where the smooth and straighten tool might start to come into their own a little bit. So let's try smoothing that now. Look at that. Yes, that's a rather, it's quite an insane result, but you might find that far more useful than your original design. And of course, we're getting a smoother shape there. Now I'll undo that just for posterity. Of course, we can also straighten that, and look at that. We end up with the same result. It still straightens, and that's cool. Now, can we bend it? Yes, we can, but it does still give you a rather insane result. So not a very useful tool in the best of scenarios. Now, what other things can we do here as well? What you want to think about is maybe is rebuilding a curve. Now, let's have a look at what's going on in this curve. So I'm going to go to Edit Point. Here we can see that the points between our curve are now different spacings. We can see here that this point, then this point, and this point are relatively even spread, but as I start getting to different points, they're all spread out differently, and we can actually change that a little bit. So we're going to use the Rebuild Curve tool, and this time I'm going to give the Options button a click, and we can see we can set all sorts of options in here. So we can go for a uniform rebuild, we can reduce things, we can keep things largely the same. I think uniform is usually the best, and of course we can think about what we want to do here as well. You can usually ignore the parameter range, and we can think about how we keep the ends. We're going to definitely keep those, but we can think about the number of spans that we want to build that curve. Now let's say we keep this at 10 and hit apply. Nothing. Oh, I need to go to object mode, sorry. Apply. It will have rebuilt that curve using 10 points, and they will now be much more evenly spaced. However, 10 might not be enough for your liking. Let's try 20. And if I hit apply, it'll now rebuild that curve, and we can see again, excuse me, I'm going to select everything and except the thing I want to select. Good old Maya. And I will head to Edit Point instead, and we can see now we actually have 20 editing points along that direction. Now, here's the important thing to think about. Because we have 200 frames, we now have 20 points, and we can safely assume that 200 divided by 20 essentially means that every 10 frames we have a point, which is great. So that number kind of works out for us quite well. So if I go to 10, sorry, let me see, we can go 1. I'm not sure how the maths actually works. Don't trust me in the maths thing, but either way, it just gives me a good indicator at least of how this is divided up. In any case though, one of the best things is that because this has been smoothed out, I can actually edit that as I see fit based on those points. And that gives me a lot more power and control over the curve that I'm making and the camera sweeps that I might be making with it. So again, if I was to want to rebuild anything, that is how I want to do it. So anyway, that was just a quick overview of the editing tools for curves. They're a really powerful subset of features that are useful, especially for anybody who wants to edit their curves, add to their curves, sort of manage those curves a little bit better to be smoother camera movements or more exciting camera movements. Then there's a bunch of really great tools that are in there for you. In any case though, I hope that made sense, and ignore me on the numbers part because maths is not my forte. So anyway, I will leave it there. Hopefully that was another useful bite-sized video. I say bite-sized, but I've been going for nearly 15 minutes, so I'll shut up now. Bunch of cool stuff in there. Give it a go and see what you think. Alright, goodbye for now. Thank you.